Hello and welcome. Today I am once again with Maria Arias. She is a licensed professional counselor, a children's play therapist, and a parenting coach. And the most important, my cousin. She has had the honor of speaking at many schools in Texas about parenting and the importance of self-care, the importance of being kind to ourselves. Because right now that we're dealing with online learning, that we're dealing with the idea that we might have a hybrid model of going back to school, or just that we might be going to school, is scary to many people. We don't know how we're going to cope. It's kind of like the equivalent of, I'm going to be on an airplane, and they say if something happens with the air temperature, with the air pressure, make sure that you put the mask on yourself and then you put it on your child. Well, Molly and I were talking about this as we were discussing the importance of self-care, and Molly sent some amazing information which we will be sharing with you. Molly?
Yes, thank you, Dana. Yeah, so I'm so happy to be here and sharing this with you as your cousin. And it's, I think it's important to both of us, the role of parenting. And the last time we talked about discipline, and this time, and it came up briefly about parent self-care. So we're bringing it in today. And I think I love what you're saying about the chaos that we're sort of in and how that can be perceived by the brain and how then the nervous system reacts of ourselves as parents. And how can we take care of ourselves in this chaotic unknown? So the unknown, yeah.
No, it's awesome. Keep going about the unknown, but can you explain to the parents what actually happens within the brain as we are being stressed by all these unknowns?
Exactly. So what happens is we get scared, basically, like you said. The unknown is perceived by our brain as a challenge. And so it sets us into a fight or flight or a collapse response.
Can you explain both of those, please?
Yeah, definitely. And so it's important, the very important piece of the self-care is understanding that when we are feeling threatened, we might go into fight or flight, or we might go into a collapse response. So the fight or flight can look like running away, wanting to hide, not wanting to face you get that letter from the school and you don't open the email. And then fighting can look like aggressive or anxious behavior, both in yourself or your child. And the other possible response under a threat or a challenge is this collapse response, where we just want to pull the cover over our heads and stay there. Mm-hmm. And so these can become patterns that when we become aware of them, we can change our nervous system response so that then we can take better care of ourselves and show up for our kids in these tremendously unknown and chaotic times.
I love that you're talking about the actual, I can take care of myself. I can actually become aware, because once we become aware, we're able to then move forward. It's when we're not aware that we keep on having these reactions. And many times as human beings, we just react and we're not sure what we're even reacting to. And we're not capable of looking at our circumstances and saying, what can I change and what can't I change? But by becoming aware of what I actually can change, I begin to take control, and the stress on the brain, on the nervous system starts to diminish. So could you explain that process a little bit, Molly?
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because it's like sometimes we don't even know what the trigger is. So really the first step is realizing I'm triggered. That's why I didn't get out of the bed this morning. That's why I feel like picking a fight with my spouse, because I'm triggered about something. So those are symptoms that we can come to recognize in ourselves as I'm perceiving a threat. My nervous system is perceiving a threat in the environment. And once we make that connection, like you said, the very important piece that I want to talk about, and it's such a cool little activity, is it's called interoception. And this is the awareness. It's one of our senses. You know how we can see and taste and touch and smell and hear? Mm-hmm. We have another system that's for our internal state. It's called interoception.
Interoception?
And so what you do is, we can do an activity right now where you can, so right now, think of a way that your feet might feel.
Itchy, happy, antsy.
Antsy, yeah. Right now, like my toes are moving. And then you think of a way that your legs might feel.
Could be the same things, could be sluggish, could be happy or bouncy. I'm thinking of Tigger.
Energetic, exactly. And then ways that your stomach might feel.
Grumbly.
You might be hungry, you might be full, you might be nervous, all the way. So then you can, think of ways that your head might feel.
Saturated, happy, light.
Yeah. Curious, light, stressed. Sometimes I get my jaw gets tight and your shoulders. And you can do this activity with your kiddos, and you can do this activity with yourself. And this is the first building block of nervous system regulation, of self-care. So learn to tap into your body and what you're feeling in that moment. So for example, if you get that email from the school and your shoulder tenses up, you can notice that and do something to regulate. So you might take a breath, you might rub your shoulders. So doing these things for yourself is a big piece of self-care.
That's a huge one. I was thinking about our other cousin, Monica, who does a lot of self-care and teaches self-care, and that's her specialty. And she talks about self-care as being something that you can bring light. So imagine light going into this area of your body where, let's say that my shoulders are really tense and, they hurt, and I can bring light into it just by closing my eyes and visualizing that light is going in and is starting to melt that. Would that be something similar to what you're talking about, Molly?
Oh, absolutely. So it's endless, the possibilities. So you can visualize a relaxation. You can even get up and get some water. I just have some examples here. You could take a deep breath. You could take a breath 4 in and 4 out. So the count to 4. And then the count to 4 out. You can go for a walk.
That's awesome. In the classroom, a lot of times, and I was talking to somebody this morning, and I was giving this example that a few years ago, we had this one student that was very, very active and had a very hard time controlling him or herself. And it was quite interesting because I started teaching them, let's breathe. I mean, I'm talking about 6-7 years ago. I started talking about let's breathe. Yeah. And normally this child, would still have a hard time out, self-regulating. And I would have the children put their hand on their belly.
Yeah.
And then breathe in, and I would say your belly, when you're breathing in, your belly has to push, itself out, and then it'll contract itself, expanding and contracting. And this one day, this child came in, and he was just really having a difficult time that day, for whatever reasons. But anyway, and this one little girl turned around and said, "We all need to sit down and breathe now because we have to help our friend." And suddenly all of us, were breathing. And as we were breathing, the mirroring that we were talking about our last video, that mirroring of neurons actually started to calm the whole classroom down. Yeah. And it was, quite exciting to see. Yeah. So there is something powerful about this. And this child did calm down, and, the whole classroom calmed down. Yeah. Which was beautiful.
Well, it's like you said, like we were saying in the last video, you regulate the environment instead of focusing on regulating the child, and all the other children are part of the environment. So since they had enough regulatory capacity to lend it to him. And so your child can really, if they're upset, borrow your capacity to regulate. That's why you want to make your capacity as strong as possible. You want to have your capacity for regulation be strong and big, so your child can borrow it from you. Even a stranger in the street, if you see someone stressed in line to pay, take a deep breath, and you're just lending them some of your regulatory capacity.
As you're saying that, you're making me think of Eckhart Tolle, who I heard a story told by him at one point in time, where he said that he entered a restaurant and he was extremely calm. And there was I don't know if you heard this story. And he said that somebody was like, his calmness was actually very difficult for this one other person. So this other person started just losing it. And I'm not sure why that person was. And then, he stayed calm. The person finally had to stand up. He couldn't take that energy and left after causing a lot of chaos. And the owner of the restaurant said, how did you do that? How did you stay calm within all of that? So my question to you is, Molly, how do we actually stay calm within all of that chaos within us or surrounding us? How do I keep that calm within myself?
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's like, it can overwhelm us. So the reason we want to practice in calm times first. We don't want to practice the breathing only when we're upset or only when our child is upset. We want to do it all the time.
Okay.
And with our dedication to serving our child as being their external regulator. So it always, whenever I'm feeling like I'm going to be overwhelmed, I always go back inside to my interoception. So I notice, how is my jaw feeling? How is my skin feeling? All of these things. And then I breathe and I work with that. And then it's a much more deliberate vibration. So in the story of Eckhart Tolle, the other person was not being deliberate. They were reacting to what was happening. Mm-hmm. But you can work so hard to make it a deliberate state of mind. But I also want to say it's not about the calmness. It's about being present with whatever is happening. So if my jaw is tight and I'm losing it, I just can run in my head, run the conversation like I'm losing it. I'm having a very hard time. And I parent myself. And I stay with myself through the anxiety.
Can you pretend that you are parenting yourself right now? Which is really not a pretend, because you are. But let's say that, you were being stressed or you were being reacting. What would that sound like or look like so that somebody knows what to expect or what to look for or what you can actually do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm imagining a scenario like if your child is crying or your child is really upset. You want to go to help them, but you cannot help them unless you help yourself first. So whenever they're crying, I notice, what is my body feeling and what are my thoughts surrounding what's happening and what are my feelings? So if I feel like, I wish that she would stop crying, I'm feeling really irritated. I wish that she would stop crying because it's too much for me. So then I need to do something physical. So I might squeeze my arms and then squeeze my legs and take a deep breath in and say to myself, I'm having a hard time with her. And so as soon as I start to feel more relaxed, I can change my thoughts and say, okay, I'm triggered. I'm definitely triggered. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And so oftentimes I'll press on my head like this.
Okay.
And as the child, you can stay connected to the child, but don't lose your connection to yourself. Because in that moment, the child is watching you, even if it's only out of the corner of their eye or they're just hearing you, to see what is the reaction to upset.
Okay.
So we want to make our reaction to the upset what we want to show to our child. And as I'm going through that process, at least I have more capacity to stay with her while she's upset. And then she can borrow some of my capacity.
So I've got something going on here. 2 questions. The first one is, why is it that I have to modulate my reaction to the upsets? Because I'm modulating something positive, which I think is kind of self-evident, but yet it is important for parents to be able to understand the full meaning of why I'm modeling it. And then the other one, you keep on doing this. Are these special trigger points? Are these just, sensitive, what is it? Sensitive?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the second question. So
Okay.
we can do it right now. So you and I, and whoever's watching this, take a second, take your right hand and rub your left shoulder.
Okay.
And rub down the arm with a good amount of pressure, all the way down to the fingertips. So now just take a breath and feel the difference between the arm that you rubbed and the other one.
It's more relaxed.
Yeah, so now let's do the other side to make it even. Take your left hand and rub your shoulder and just rub down the arm like you did the other one. And so what I have come to find is that that's what helps me feel good. Mm-hmm. So you might be a person who likes to get a glass of ice water. You might be a person who needs to stomp their feet. So whatever feels good to you, do that. And it's kind of like how you would teach your child to drive a car. I mean, you teach them how to do stuff. You teach a child how to pour a glass of milk. So teach them how to manage emotional upset. And when they're emotionally upset, they're looking to us to help them learn how to manage it. So that's why we model it.
So it's we don't have these crazy reactions. And then, you know, we go, well, why are you reacting that way? And it's like, well, because I'm mirroring you.
Yeah, and so many of us, we don't see what we're doing as parents. I myself have been there until I took this type of study, and we don't know what our feelings are. We don't know what our body's feeling. We don't know what our thoughts are because probably we weren't taught that. So we have to parent ourselves as we're parenting our children, almost simultaneous.
I think that's one of the kindest acts of love towards ourselves. You know, sometimes we have to parent ourselves to fill that void that, you know, our parents did the best they could. They, you know, they really did do the best they could. They always came out of a place of love, but yet there's always some part that still needs that little nurturing, that little loving area.
Yeah. And honestly, Don, if you know, I work with families regularly in my private practice, and I think if all you did was do a month of self-care in that way, like being present with yourself when you're upset, your child would have a much, much better time with their behavior and discipline.
As I was I want to bring it back to the classroom for just a second. And I know that this is self-care for parents, but as we were pressing like this, I was remembering some of the children at school that I've talked about before that have autism are just amazing. And one of the things that they do is that they wear sometimes like these heavy belt, not heavy, they've got lead in them, like these jackets or vests that have lead in them. And they put them on to help them self-regulate because it's that pressure. And I was thinking about the blanket that my mom called the other day, a few days ago. She's like, they've got a special blanket that has lead in it, so it's supposed to help you sleep even better. And I was like, well, where do I get one?
Yeah.
That I think would be really interesting to
Absolutely.
have. And, you know, as I'm thinking about this, I'm getting another idea, which there's this movie called Temple Grandin. She is an amazing lady. She has autism. She changed the world, the way they raise cattle, by looking at the patterns that these people, you know, had created for cattle to go through these different, you know, areas where cattle goes. But what was very interesting was that she started paying attention to this because she would go and to self-soothe and self-calm herself. She would put herself in, you know, those things where I don't even know what it's called, but they put the cow in between these like metal bars that put pressure, and they create this pressure, and she compared that to a hug. And when I see some of my students walking with their vests, I think they're needing a hug. And if they need it, I need it too.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. That's such a neat example. And, you know, a lot of the work that I do now, we're viewing autism like as a sensitivity. And there's more and more sensitive people. That means that their senses are more heightened and they're more aware. And what Temple Grandin is describing is interoception, is the feeling of the pressure on you. How does it feel in your body? And, you know, some people like pressure, some people like space. So getting to know yourself and your needs is a very important piece of interoception. And you might at one moment like something with heavy pressure and another moment not. And I also am highly recommending for schooling online, which a lot of families are going to be doing, getting children some fidgets on Amazon or from any local toy stores or child development stores, things that children can play with their hands while they're on screens. Because interoception, we can be cut off a little bit from our sense of our body, our interoception, when we're on screens all day. So important.
Can you explain that a little bit more? How do we get cut off from our body?
So, you know, so when we're working and we're working online, our body signals go down so we can pay attention to what's happening. That's why when you turn off the TV, you know, you might notice your child turns off the screen. All of a sudden they notice, oh, they've got to go to the bathroom and they're hungry, but they weren't feeling their hunger and their need to go to the bathroom because they were connecting with a screen.
This has been amazing, Molly. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I had no idea. I mean, I understood the concepts, but I didn't actually know the name interoception, which is pretty interesting. So let's leave it here. And we're going to have to do another one of these at some point in time, hopefully very soon. And we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you so much.
Thank you.